Welcome to another week and another Red Short webinar. My name's Bill Schenkelberg, the Managing Director here at Red Sky Alliance, and today we'll be discussing with the Adam Group what they are seeing as a new and current hacker profile. As always, you can find information on related topics at redskyalliance.org or follow the link in the chat window. If you've ever missed any of the previous Red Shorts, you can find them on our website. Today, we're going to have a short chat with Jason Sgro, who's the senior partner of the Adam Group, and we will be talking about current hacker profiles that they have been seeing through their analytical team. So what's the purpose of the talk here today? Several weeks ago, Jason and I met for breakfast as we do on kind of a routine basis, and we were discussing what he has been seeing, he and his team has been seeing as far as hackers and their techniques and how they're operating. And it was kind of a 180 from what I was used to and what I thought was really the lethal hacker profile. In the past, our company used to do, analytical profiles on hackers and hacker groups. And whenever I think of like bad hackers or prominent hackers, I think of like, tier 5, tier 6 type level hackers, APT type state sponsored. And that's not what Jason said that they're seeing a lot of. And I thought that was really interesting. So with that, Jason, why don't you I'll let you formally introduce yourself and maybe give a little background on what Adam Group does.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bill. Always good to have these chats, and certainly I do miss the breakfast food while we're having them, but
Right.
I'm sure we can make do here. Thanks everybody for taking a moment. My name, as Bill said, is Jason Sgro. I'm the senior partner and head of cybersecurity and human privacy here at the Adam Group. For anyone that's not familiar with us, we are the largest incident response and privately held, cyber counterintelligence and intelligence company in New Hampshire. We work with tons of private entities as well as public sector throughout New Hampshire and the region, trying to keep the homeland safe, quite frankly, but also to look at trending and look at analytics and trying to find out what the data can show us. Because honestly, when we look at companies, even if you add up all the cyber companies that are in the region, we're not a one-for-one match against the threat actor population that's out there. And this is not a battle that we are going to win by going toe-to-toe with, every cyber criminal, whether they're, advanced persistent threat level or they are, the entry level ransomware-as-a-service type cybercrime. There's just too many of them out there, and the attack vectors evolve too quickly to not fight smart. Right? And that's really what our data footprint allows us to do, and really mirror and foresee some of the actions, allow us to develop counter methods of making sure that we know basically what could happen, how it's going to happen, and we're prepared when we go in. That is what we do on a daily basis.
Great. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate that. So if you can remember back a couple breakfast sessions ago that we had a discussion about what you guys are seeing as far as the current hacker profile. So with that, I'll let if you can explain what you're seeing and kind of what they're doing, any new techniques or anything like that, please feel free to share with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in order to understand the threat landscape, we have to look at the psychology of these threat actors. And in the past, right, if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, you would see a lot of maybe APT level stuff, state-sponsored stuff at the highest level. But when you get down to municipalities or schools, hospitals, local institutions, both public and private, we weren't seeing a lot of high-level threat actor activity. We're seeing a lot of one-and-done type threat actors. We're seeing ransomware gangs and all of that. And so that became kind of a game of table tennis, if you will, if you'll kind of suffer the analogy with me. A lot of it 5 years ago was, a ransomware. They corrupt your data. You have to pay to get your data back. We responded in kind by doing air gap backups and multi levels of data integrity resilience. And so corrupting our data, making it so we had to pay to get it back, turned out not to be financially viable any longer. And so they shift the tactic, right? And then back and forth and back and forth, back and forth. And the landscape today is really being influenced by some geopolitical events. And I'm sure everybody listening to this is probably aware of the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Right.
I'll use that term, in the broadest sense, conflict. That's emboldened a certain area of the world. And what I mean by that is there are threat actors, right? And we are making some progress internationally with some big cases. Some ransomware gangs got toppled. I think word was starting to get out that if you're not careful, you can actually get caught doing this. It's not just free money. Well, when a major conflict erupts in that region, where quite frankly a lot of that activity came from, no one's going in to arrest these people anymore, right? So when you look at the motivation, what you're seeing is somebody that can operate with almost total immunity from law enforcement. Certainly, there is active law enforcement still in Ukraine, of course. Interpol plays their part. Everybody does what they can, but it is, for all intents and purposes, a war zone at this point. So no one's rushing into the battlefield trying to get a cyber criminal that may be operating within the country. And so that has created a very bold threat actor that can operate with immunity for a good amount of time. And that was really shifted the profile. The way that it shifted, I'm seeing now, we look at really two groups. We used to look at all sorts of groups, but to keep it simple, we look at two different profiles. The first profile is the person that is still doing the ransomware as a service, or they're still doing the type of quick money playbook, right? They're going to extort some people over a very small amount of time. They're going to try to do a little bit of damage, but ultimately they're going to grab some cash and disappear. Small time criminal organizations, certainly some organized crime, but nothing that would rise to a very high level. When a threat actor breaches, right, and we can talk a little bit about how that's happening, when they breach these environments, if they react with an extortion or they react with a detonation of a ransomware or malware of some kind almost immediately, we know that that's probably the type of threat actor we're dealing with, right? They're either trying to just sow some distrust or they're looking for some easy money. But there's another kind of threat actor profile that is really important. I think we have to look at that. We're seeing a huge increase in persistent monitoring. And what I mean by persistent monitoring is the kind of threat actor that achieves penetration into an environment and does nothing observable, right? So no indicators of compromise, no detonation of a payload, no ransom message, nothing. They're monitoring these environments for quite a long time. I mean, when I say a long time, I mean greater than 6 months. In some cases, locally, we've had up to 3 years of persistent monitoring inside of an environment. And that stands out to me as a behavioral shift, because you're talking about somebody that clearly has some kind of funding. And I don't think it's wise for us to speculate the who's and the what's and the countries that are behind. It's not necessarily that. It's large surveillance networks. It doesn't mean that, it's China backing Russia, trying to get into all of our stuff. Yeah, of course, that's a possibility. But if you look at how crime is being monetized, having a persistent and unknown connection into a large network of places is proving potentially to be more advantageous financially to a threat actor than just detonating and ransoming them all one by one. And so when we see these long, persistent holdouts, when we see this persistent monitoring for a year, 2 years, and they're not extorting these folks, it means the funding for what they're doing must be coming from somewhere else, or they are monetizing it in a different way. And that is a whole new type of threat actor that we used to see only at the highest levels, right? Like if you look at state-sponsored cyber terrorism and stuff like that, you would expect long-range and long-term, deeply entrenched surveillance networks to be developed by only the highest and most elite practitioners of kind of the cyber tradecraft. And that's now coming downstream. We're starting to see that in threat actor organizations that we very well know are not state sponsored, right? They're not, if they are selling to the state, it's beyond our ability to confirm or you confirm any kind of attribution there. But it is one of the most important changes is that if somebody does have patience, if they do have the ability to sit there financially and monitor and not detonate anything, then the money has to be coming from somewhere and the motivation has to be different than we understood. And that is a big change, because when you talk about everything from local tiny networks, think about your average dentist office to a police department to a state network to all of that, and then you add in we're in an election season, and what does monitoring mean for that? A lot of this is probably data gathering, right? They're not going to eventually extort these folks. They're looking to gather data, potentially sell that data, and be quiet about it. And there very well also may be, if I was to speculate, I'd say they're all traditional types of crime here. If you can steal someone's identity and not let them know about it, that's much more useful than if you detonate a ransomware and then everybody's on alert, right? So we've got this hybrid now, and we've got this new type of threat actor that's getting in and doing this persistent monitoring, which I think is a really big change for our environment.
So getting back to the new profile or the current profile that you're seeing, looking at like a tier 1 script kiddie type hacker, right, up to 5-6 state sponsored. In your estimation, where would you kind of put the current level of these hackers that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think they're heartily in the middle, right? We're starting to the ransomware-as-a-service gangs and that sort of stuff. When you look at a lot of the old, if I go back a year or 2 years, the doppelpayers and all of that, when we were deploying a lot of ransom, and then just a lot of destructive stuff, password stealers, the emotets and the Qbots and things of that nature. Right. That was a very low level cyber criminal. They were just, they were getting into whatever they could get because you didn't patch or you had a very obvious vulnerability that was picked up. We're seeing less and less and less of that. Part of it's that they're learning, and certainly the criminal organizations are evolving. So it's not to say that they're not the same people. They very well could be the same people, but they've got 3 or 4 years experience now, so they're not script kiddies anymore.
Right.
And in terms of the state-sponsored stuff, I think there's always that undercurrent of these geopolitical tensions, right? You've always got China looking to become the world's partner of choice for a lot of things. Or you look at the relationship between China and Russia. You look at certainly things that are going on in Africa and South America and conflicts where cyber criminals could benefit from disrupting the U.S. and whatnot. But that always happens. But we're not seeing at the smaller company, at the local level, we're not seeing a ton of that either. We're seeing this middle ground. To use your, the rating scale, I'd put them, right in the middle, right at like a 3. These are sophisticated organizations. They have financial backing. They have patience, which is something we don't see in criminal enterprise very often. In cyber, people try to. It's almost like the money is radioactive, or not the money. The data is radioactive, and they're trying to get rid of it as fast as possible. We're seeing a tremendous amount of patience there, and that requires an operational discipline and a discipline in developing and deploying your tradecraft that suggests to me that they are advancing. If they are the same organizations, they're advancing in sophistication, or we're seeing the emergence of a new class of organizations that has capability.
So would it be fair to say that these low to mid-level hackers now are either using, stealing, or maybe even buying some of the techniques that the higher level hackers had, or state-sponsored types?
Yeah, it becomes a little bit of a toothpaste in a tube problem if you look at again what's going on with Russia, Ukraine. So plenty of highest level threat actors are involved in that conflict and are very, very public about their involvement in that conflict in one way or another. what happens is you get governments, you get the intelligence community and the cyber community that builds all the toys, right? They build new techniques, they build tactics, they shelve 0-day threats, and they build cyber apparatus that the world has never seen. And when you get into a conflict like this, they deploy it. But once you deploy it, it's out there. And so we see the emergence of a lot of 0-day threats. We see the wiperwares. We see the destructive technology, which frankly, in a lot of cases, is not super well written. A lot of it looks like it was deployed or finished in a rush when you start to really break it down. But there's also some real high level techniques. There's some previously unknown 0-day events, and there's absolutely some real military grade cyber technology that's been thrust into a conflict zone where nobody can control what happens to it. The same reason that you don't take your best UAVs or whatnot and fly them in a place where you don't control airspace, right? Because you may lose one and then you lose the technology. Well, the same thing happens with cyber. You deploy this stuff, and now every little threat actor that maybe didn't have this level of sophistication starts getting a heightened level of sophistication, and that very well may explain some of the rise of prominence and effectiveness of some of these smaller organizations that maybe would never have come by some of these techniques if they hadn't been shown to them in Ukraine.
Right, that makes total sense. So, as you know, I've been in law enforcement for a long time, and people love hearing cop stories. So do you have any real life experience of what's going on currently now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the things that's been surprising to me is the rate of innovation, and I'll kind of get to the event here. We're starting to see the first real two-factor and multi-factor authentication defeats. The tokenized session issues, and certainly some in the news. There's plenty of open source reporting on how to begin the process of trying to get around two-factor. One thing that's interesting to me is that you don't develop those type of techniques by accident or without a lot of trial. And so we've noticed a lot of technology being tested. And I guess I'm going to keep using this example, right? We see the technology being tested in the Ukraine. If you've got something that you want to try, right, doing it in a sandbox or doing it in a limited atmosphere where you may or may not have made certain assumptions is a lot different than taking something and deploying it against an actual company or inside of a conflict and really works. And if it doesn't work, then you fix it. And you've got this way to kind of like rapid prototype, rapid test in real life, which you would not necessarily have in any other time unless there was a conflict that had a cyber component. And not that there's not plenty of conflicts that you could jump into around the world. This is a very common tactic. But the Russia-Ukraine one is such, I think, a command and control disaster from the perspective of what's actually happening there and who's controlling what's happening there. It doesn't look like a modern conflict, right? It's a ground war in a way that really we don't think about that stuff. And I'm certainly not a military tactics expert, but that allows you to try stuff and iterate and iterate and iterate. And when we see threat actors from maybe Iran, or we see threat actors from places that we knew previously didn't have really high levels of sophistication, start to rapidly gain sophistication, a lot of it is through that trial. And so to bring it to the story, we did see some attempts just recently against an Microsoft O365 infrastructure, which is, by the way, one of the most common ways they get in. For some reason, people don't like multi-factor authentication. You will lose your passwords at some point. Like there's just eventually there's going to be some exfiltration. They'll trick you. You'll go to a fake Amazon site, like whatever it is. Even the most careful people, you will at some point lose your password. Or somebody will leverage some kind of brute force attack or dictionary attack against you and grab it if you're not careful. And so two-factor is this great way of making sure that you've got some added insulation against that probability. Well, if they can defeat that, they can get into, your email and your SharePoint and everything else and begin the process of monitoring, because Microsoft 0365 and Azure AD hosts a lot of single sign-on against a lot of applications, and even all the way into like VPN tunnels and things like that. When people sign up for that 0365 and they sign up for single sign-on, their credentials become really, really important, and thus making them a target. Well, when a lot of our clients get breached, they'll get breached through 0365. They'll be actively monitored. Their email will be monitored. They're looking at them for a year, maybe more than that, maybe up to 3 years. They're watching these communications, studying the organization. All of those things are happening. That is really the earliest indicator of compromise, is the monitoring of basic communications like email. So we look very closely at that. When we start to see these crazy tokenized, like trying to create a tokenized session and see if they can fake it out, we realized that even the two-factor folks sometimes defeat themselves. And so what I mean by that is there's actually a button, there's a switch on 0365 if you've ever signed into it, and it'll say like, don't bother me with my multi-factor for 60 days or 120 days. Well, what are you doing? You're like disabling that protection. So of course, everybody enables that, and they're only doing a multi-factor on a timed interval. And so one of the things that we did for the certain client, we said, hey, listen, think something's going on, can't really see it. I want to invalidate all of the tokenized connections for multi-factor. And it was a very, very small organization. It was probably like 20 or 30 people maximum in the organization. And when we did that, it flagged everybody to have to re-authenticate for their multi-factor authentication. And within a period of about, it was less than a single work shift for us. So less than 8 hours, they had received over 200 two-factor authentication requests and change requests against their infrastructure, because they had locked out more than one person that was monitoring them. They had so much insecurity, right? Like they actually had an issue where they were being monitored, and somebody else saw the flaw in there and started monitoring them. And they actually, they got in this multiple stage, which was just absolutely incredible, that we got to see. And we had attribution on at least 2 threat actors that were performing monitoring, and not total attribution, because I know that's it's a little bit weird. But yeah, it was a very, very strange environment to see. One other one we had, and I think we've got time for one quick story.
Sure.
We were dealing with again, one of these kind of level 3 threat actors, where they had been doing some persistent monitoring for about 6 months. And instead of completely booting them out of the system, the client was really, really interested in whether or not it was a corporate crime, right? If it was more like a corporate espionage type of like stealing trade secrets type thing, because they had a competitor that was very, I guess, aggressive in trying to obtain some of their trade secrets and manufacturing secrets. And so they wanted us to keep the connection open to see if we could get some attribution, and certainly watch it and limit what they were seeing, but not tip them off that something had happened. Well, a couple of weeks into this, they got a pretty massive ransomware attack, and it destroyed quite a bit of data. They recovered without too much of an issue, because they're a large, sophisticated organization, so they didn't have much of a problem there. But it made us close the tunnel. And in going through the postmortem with the forensics teams, they realized that there was one threat actor that was doing the monitoring, and somebody else actually came in, found the flaw that was one of these more level 1, just going in for a buck, and actually not only blew up the whole thing for us and our little sting that we had set up, but destroyed the connection for the primary threat actor. And so you can picture these people, they've got this nice little monitoring network, and somebody else finds the hole and goes and blows the whole party for them. And now everyone's out. It was like, you can't make this stuff up. It's just like, okay, now we've got to the point where multiple threat actors are starting to see these holes, which I think is interesting too, because it means that this searching, right, the threat hunting, has gotten a lot more sophisticated, at least in the last 6 months, than I've ever seen. I've almost never seen a multiple event where more like there was attribution on more than one threat actor simultaneously in the same environment. That would have been extremely rare.
Mhm.
Many months ago, right? Is maybe even just at the top of the year, 9 months ago. But now it's actually becoming more common, and that signals, I think, an advancement in threat hunting more than anything.
So there's no honor among thieves, huh?
No, and if you're somebody with patience and you're building a surveillance network and you've got these low-level criminals that are just trying to make a buck and they're blowing up a good thing for you, there's probably a reckoning coming at some level of the crime world.
Right. So to bring your cop stories to a close, did anyone go to jail?
Nobody. We didn't
Okay.
get any attribution on the corporate thing, even though we thought we would. But and then most of this getting positive attribution, like a threat actor really has to mess up in order to like pin it down at
Mm-hmm.
90% or better. You have super really high confidence of who they are. What we typically do with attribution is we can get to the point where we understand the tactic, we understand the code. Usually, the source code is our best clue.
Hmm.
Because certain modifications and certain comments in the code are made by certain organizations. So we use that in our OFAC checks. That's one of the best ways we can do it now. But with reverse proxies and multiple layers of VPNs and things of that, it's pretty hard to really narrow it down with any certainty anymore.
So if you can I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here, but if you can give us a couple bullet points of what you're seeing as kind of the current uh, hacker profile from as far as what you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, it really is this emergence of more lower level organizations that are becoming more sophisticated and more capable. Right, we're talked about advancements in threat hunting capabilities, their ability to find the threats and manipulate them. Right,
Mhm.
they've gotten new technology, everything from military grade cyber tech all the way down to just basic advantages in learning that they've undergone from being in the business for years now, as a lot of these crime organizations have. We see those techniques being deployed for a high rate of persistent monitoring, which is an entirely new type of attack. They're not just trying to blow up your data anymore. They're trying to take it. They're trying to understand it. They're trying to study your organizations.
Yeah.
That patience is really important. And then just really understanding that, if you're not doing the basics still, right? If you're not integrating two-factor, if you're not watching how long your tokenized sessions are, if you're not deploying single sign-on in a way that you can monitor such that you don't lose so much of your data all at once on one username and password, then these types of advancements for these organizations are really going to hurt you. And of course, we're here if that happens, but we'd prefer to talk to you over French toast than
Right.
on a really dark day.
Jason, I'd like to thank you. This was for me, it was a really interesting talk about how the hacker profiles are evolving and changing, and sounds like the Atom Group is right on top of seeing these new techniques and how they're doing it. And you mentioned a couple times, conflicts, and they hide in the conflicts. I think natural disasters are in there too, and with the hurricane blowing through Florida, and then now looks like it's going to hit the Carolinas. That's another avenue for these people to apply their criminal trade. Which is not a good thing. So again, and thank everyone for who's in attendance here today. I appreciate that. And if you have any questions regarding the topic that we talked about, you can get in touch with Jay McKee at wapaclabs.com, or you can email directly to Jason at the Atom Group. Jason, do you have an email that like a general email that people could get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can email me directly right at jason at theatomgroup.com. That's TheAtomGroup.com.
Great. Well, thank you. All right. Well, for everyone, join us again next week on October 19th for our next Red Short. If you missed any of the previous Red Short reports and webinars, you can find them at redskyalliance.org/redshorts. If you're not a member of our redskyalliance.org, you can sign up. It's free. And with your free membership, you get access to all different types of Red Sky Alliance content, and to include indicators of compromise that we have for various people. So with that, I'll say thanks again to Jason, and I'm going to sign off, and everyone have a great rest of the week. Thank you.